one of the defining pictures during the weeks of unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. This front page of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch shows a police officer in full riot gear firing tear gas at protesters, some of whom were throwing bottles. That was just one of the images from Ferguson that sparked a national debate on the so-called militarization of local police forces across the country. Here in Massachusetts, dozens of departments, big and small, have received millions of dollars worth of military-grade weapons, prompting some to ask just how much firepower departments need to serve and protect. In the small town of Tyngsboro, some 40 miles north of Boston, violent crime is almost non-existent. Police Chief Rich Howe can't even remember the last time there was a homicide. But that doesn't stop him from preparing for potential threats.
Look around at where the school shootings have happened in this country. Do they happen predominantly in just big cities? No, they don't. They happen in small town America. And those individual small departments need to be prepared.
Part of that preparation includes a request for AR-15 rifles, a semi-automatic version of the M16 combat rifle. Howe is hoping to obtain them through the Defense Department's 1033 program, which transfers surplus military equipment to local law enforcement. Howe says the new rifles will augment those the department bought on its own.
They're weapons that, as I said, can be purchased by a civilian with an FID card in Massachusetts. So how would it not be appropriate for a police department to have them for their officers?
Tyngsboro is just the latest department to seek weapons through the DoD program. According to the Boston Globe, 82 local police departments have received military-grade rifles in recent years. In West Springfield, police made headlines when it was revealed they received 2 grenade launchers. But Howe believes the weapons are just a small part of a program that fulfills basic needs for cash-strapped departments.
In a lot of cases, it's equipment that we need regardless. So if we weren't getting it through this avenue, we would have to find a way to purchase it through our budgets.
Those necessities include storage racks, safety glasses, and ammunition bags.
Guys with their magazines or ammo dump boxes, so they can carry them and they can connect them to whatever they want with this snap system. So it's a nice vinyl durable bag.
But Chief Howe admits there's a need for balance.
I would expect that residents in this town expect that the police department is prepared, not unprepared. This is part of that preparation. If I were seeking out missile launchers and tanks, well, I would think that somebody would say, hey, wait a minute, why would you need those? I agree.
And Tyngsboro residents we spoke with share Howe's sentiment about being prepared.
Well, I don't think it hurts to have them trained in all kinds of weaponry. I mean, they should be comfortable. Every human being should be comfortable handling a weapon.
My husband's a teacher, and we've talked about this, and definitely we're for it. So, yep, you can't trust anybody nowadays.
But Merrimack College criminology professor Tom Nolan says programs like 1033 are transforming local departments into militarized forces with weapons that aren't necessary for regular policing.
Most officers are equipped with at least 50 rounds of ammunition, taser weapons, pepper spray weapons. So I think that they're already more than sufficiently equipped.
He doesn't object to small departments like Tyngsboro taking advantage of federal programs for basic equipment, but he worries that with high-powered weaponry, many departments risk losing touch with the communities they're sworn to serve.
It strains the relationship. I think great strides were made in the 1990s, particularly here in Boston and in Massachusetts, in endorsing and privileging community policing principles.
Yet Boston came under scrutiny late last year when then-Commissioner Ed Davis proposed buying over 30 AR-15s for the department. Then Mayor-elect Marty Walsh opposed the plan. And now, according to Boston police, Davis's successor, William Evans, does not see the weapons as appropriate for the city of Boston.
Maybe the criticism was right. But then again, I think it's also important that if you're being transparent and you feel that you're doing the right thing, to explain it.
But even with transparency, that doesn't mean Massachusetts residents will agree that police should have such weapons. So where is the line between a well-prepared police force and an overly militarized one? I'm joined now by Jessie Rossman. She's a staff attorney with the ACLU of Massachusetts who specializes in civil rights issues. So Jessie, are you concerned that not just that they have them, but they're going to overuse them the way they did in Ferguson, frankly?
I think that's an excellent question because it's not simply about the weapons themselves. It really is what kind of standards are in place, what kinds of policies are in place, and what kind of training is in place to ensure that our police officers are using these in the appropriate circumstances. SWAT teams were initially made to handle situations like armed barricades and hostage situations. But what we've seen based on the national data is the vast majority of time SWAT teams are right now being deployed to effectuate search warrants. And part of the problem is we don't have, certainly in Massachusetts, across the board standardized reasons when police departments are going in as SWAT teams and how they're then doing reporting afterwards.
But in defense of Ferguson, and I recognize those pictures were particularly frightening and grotesque in some ways. If not then, when? I mean, that could have been a full-bore riot situation. Why not bring out all your heavy-duty gear?
Well, I think there's two responses to that question. First and foremost, we need to make sure that these types of practices aren't actually escalating the situation. And it's not just the ACLU that are raising these types of questions. Attorney General Holder has actually said, the president has said, and senators from both sides of the aisles have said, we need to look at when these practices are being used and if they're actually effective, because if not, you can actually inflame the situation. I think it's also extremely important to differentiate between situations like an armed barricade or a hostage situation, or potentially when you have large groups of people and there are actually dangerous situations that you can see on the ground, versus what we're seeing also across the country where the vast majority of these deployments are happening to effectuate search warrants. Once you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You need policies in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
All right, let's bring law enforcement into the discussion here. I'm joined now by Philip Tavares. He's the Chief of Police in Marshfield and a 26-year veteran of the force. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you.
First of all, have you participated in the 1033 program, and have you had the opportunity to avail yourselves of some of these spare goods?
Yes, we have. We've been fortunate enough to receive, I believe we have 5 Humvees, military Humvees. They're used primarily for search and rescue. We have, real bad flooding conditions in Marshfield at times, and to take those through the salt water and to evacuate the elderly and bring them to a shelter has been most useful for us. We would have been out of business for the blizzard Nemo had we not had these Humvees to traverse through the unplowed roads, the trees that were down, and the deep water conditions, salt water conditions that we had to face. So they were actually, a nice piece of life-saving equipment.
What about assault weapons?
Yes, we received, almost 20 years ago, we received 8 M16s. We don't use those now other than for parades. They are locked in the armory in the basement of the police station. But we did have them. They were not deployed on the street. They were in the armory in the event that there was ever a real emergency where they'd be needed. And
has your police force, and I'm sure it's small, we're talking about small-town police forces, is everybody there thoroughly trained on how to use advanced weaponry?
Yes, every single one of my police officers is trained in at least one of the handguns, the shotgun, and the patrol rifle. As well as the taser.
And how do you feel about some of this? I mean, grenade launchers, missile launchers, I mean, is some of this excessive in your mind?
Well, yeah, when you hear grenade launcher, it definitely throws a red flag up, and I was quite disturbed when I heard that. But the image you're thinking of is the police shooting a grenade at a crowd of people or at a particular person. But what's interesting is that those grenade launchers are often used as less than lethal weapons that do deploy smoke, tear gas, bean bags, and rubber bullets. So it's less than lethal force aimed at trying to save lives as opposed to blow something up.
Just I went on a map today that actually was very detailed. It had all the kinds of weaponry, and most of it wasn't weaponry, like night vision goggles. And when you clicked on night vision goggles, up popped a map of the United States, and it showed you exactly where that kind of equipment was going. And some of it was obvious, like all the border states, that's where the night vision goggles were going. Some of the weaponry was going to some of the big cities. So it didn't feel like it was random or excessive in small communities.
Well, what we know right now is the programs, what they're able to release publicly is simply county by county. We don't have city by city where all of these different programs are releasing their information and, their weaponry. And we also don't have any kind of reporting back to the federal government about how these weapons are being used. I think if there are instances where grenade launchers are being adapted for different purposes, that's something the public should actually know. And that's one of the reasons why both the administration and Congress has called for hearing to ensure maybe we don't need to get rid of this program altogether. But
so
there
your
needs to be
issue
more
is with
oversight and
the
auditing.
weapons, not necessarily Humvees or night vision goggles or that kind of thing.
It depends on how things are being used, and we just don't have that transparency and oversight right now to allow the community to speak up about what is going on their home streets.
Do you feel, Chief, you've ever taken something you didn't really need because it was available and hey, why not?
Not in our case, no. Everything that we've asked for, there's been a real need. Particularly, almost, I was going to say that we've had those M16s. We don't have a use for them now other than parades. But there was a tactical use for them back when our town couldn't afford to buy the patrol rifle that cost primarily, well, roughly about $2,500 a piece. And that was from the lessons learned in 1997 at the North Hollywood, California shootout, where there were over 2,000 rounds that were shot at the police. They did not have rifles and they didn't have armored cars. And there were 11 police officers that were injured and 7 civilians. They had to commandeer a bank armored car, and they had to commandeer rifles from a gun store because the weapons that they had, the handgun and the shotgun, couldn't penetrate the armor of the people they were up against in North Hollywood, California. So the lessons learned, we evolved. And I would say that it's not really the militarization of the police department, it's the modernization. And we evolved. We learned that the 38 caliber handgun couldn't penetrate and stop certain people, so we upgraded to a .357 Magnum. The .357 Magnum only carried 6 rounds, so we moved up to semi-automatic weapons that carried more rounds and had better stopping power. So our firepower should be equal to or greater than the people that we face in order to save the general public's life and the officers' lives.
All right. Chief Philip Tavares, thanks so much for coming. Jesse Rossman, thank you too.
Thank you.